The auction. The marketplace buzzed with strange sounds and unfamiliar smells. Bright neon lights flickered overhead, casting a mix of blue and red glows on the grimy streets. It was the heart of Creighton Station, a hub for outlaws, traders, and anyone looking for something, or someone, off the record. Sam had been here before, but this time, he wasn't looking for spare parts or illegal tech. He needed a worker, cheap labor. Nothing more, nothing less. Sam walked through the crowd, his boots clanking on the metal floor. Around him, alien traders shouted in languages he couldn't understand, pointing to cages filled with creatures from every corner of the galaxy. Some were massive, with scales that gleamed under the lights. Others were small and hunched, their eyes darting nervously. Sam tried to ignore the pit growing in his stomach. He didn't like this part of the galaxy. Too much noise, too many secrets. At the end of the market, a tall alien with purple skin and 6 arms stood on a platform. He was the auctioneer, wearing a long black robe and holding a translator device in one hand. Behind him were several cages, each holding a different being. Most of them looked half dead, malnourished, exhausted, and hopeless. Sam scanned the line. He didn't care about appearances. He just needed someone strong enough to help with mining work on his small operation out on Kelver 7. Next item, the auctioneer shouted, his voice amplified by a speaker. A cage was dragged forward by 2 burly guards. Inside was a small, thin alien woman. Her skin was pale, almost glowing, and her eyes, large and golden, stood out against her fragile frame. She sat silently, her knees drawn to her chest, staring at the floor. "This one's useless," the auctioneer announced with a sneer. "Mute, won't speak, weak, barely eats. But hey, maybe she'll make a good decoration for someone's collection. Starting price, 5 credits. The crowd chuckled, a cruel sound that made Sam clench his fists. He didn't like these people, but he wasn't here to play hero. He was here for a deal. 5 credits was nothing. A price so low it was laughable. Most of the other creatures were being sold for hundreds, sometimes thousands. Sam looked at the alien in the cage. Her golden eyes flicked up for a moment, meeting his. Something about the way she stared at him, calm, almost resigned, made his chest tighten. He didn't know why, but he raised his hand. 5 credits, he said. The auctioneer raised an eyebrow. Really? You want this one? Sam shrugged. Cheapest worker here. She'll do. A few aliens in the crowd muttered to each other, but no one else bid. The auctioneer slammed his hand down. Sold. 5 credits to the human. The guards shoved the cage toward Sam, who quickly transferred the credits. The alien woman didn't resist as they unlocked the cage and pushed her out. She stood up slowly, her movements delicate, like she might shatter if someone pushed her too hard. Sam handed her a cloak to cover herself. The market wasn't a safe place for someone like her, even as a slave. "Come on," Sam said gruffly, walking toward his ship. She followed silently, her bare feet barely making a sound on the metal floor. As they weaved through the crowd, an old alien with gray, scaly skin grabbed Sam's arm. "You don't know what you've bought," the alien hissed, his voice low and raspy. Sam pulled his arm away. "What are you talking about?" The alien leaned closer, his yellow eyes darting to the woman behind Sam. "That one. She's not what she seems. Be careful, human." Sam frowned but didn't reply. He hated cryptic warnings. Without another word, he kept walking, his new worker trailing behind him. Back on his ship, Sam led the woman to a small corner of the cargo bay, where he had set up a simple bunk. "This is where you'll stay," he said, pointing at the bed. "I'll explain your duties tomorrow. For now, get some rest." She didn't reply, just sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. Sam sighed, running a hand through his short brown hair. "You can understand me, right?" She nodded, her golden eyes meeting his for a brief moment before looking away again, It was the first sign she wasn't completely empty inside. "Good. That's a start," Sam muttered. He turned to leave but hesitated at the door. "What's your name?" No response. He wasn't surprised. Shaking his head, he walked to the cockpit and slumped into the pilot's chair. This wasn't how he planned to spend his day, but at least he had a worker now. Even if she didn't talk, she could follow instructions. That was enough. Or so he thought. Later that night, Sam couldn't sleep. Something about the way the old alien had warned him kept nagging at the back of his mind. "You don't know what you've bought." The words echoed in his head. What did that mean? He got up and walked back to the cargo bay. The woman was still sitting on the bed, staring out the small window at the stars. She didn't move as he approached. "Hey," Sam said quietly. "You're not gonna cause me trouble, are you?" She turned her head slightly, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. For a second, Sam thought he saw something. Fear, sadness, maybe even anger, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. She shook her head slowly. Sam exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Good. Just don't make me regret this." As he turned to leave, he thought he heard something. So faint he almost missed it. A single word, spoken in a voice soft as a whisper. "Danger." Sam froze, his hand hovering over the door control. He looked back at her, but she was silent again, her eyes fixed on the stars. For the first time in a long while, Sam felt a chill run down his spine. What had he gotten himself into? The journey. The silence inside Sam's ship was heavy, almost suffocating. The hum of the engine was the only sound as the vessel cruised through the vast emptiness of space. Sam sat in the pilot's chair, staring at the navigation console, but his mind wasn't on the course. It was on her, the alien woman he had brought aboard. She sat in the corner of the cargo bay, unmoving, like a statue. Wrapped in the old cloak he'd given her, she didn't make a sound. She didn't eat, didn't sleep, and didn't even flinch when the ship jolted during takeoff. She just sat there, her glowing golden eyes fixed on nothing, or maybe everything. Sam glanced at the security monitor showing the cargo bay. Her stillness made his skin crawl. "Mute," the auctioneer had said. But what about that single word she'd whispered before? Danger. He told himself it was just his imagination. A long day, too many strange faces, and an old alien's warning playing tricks on his mind. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The ship's autopilot chimed, signaling a course correction. Sam sighed and pushed back from the console. "Might as well check on her," he muttered to himself. He stepped into the dimly lit cargo bay, the sound of his boots echoing against the metal walls. She didn't react. Not when he stopped a few feet away. Not when he crouched to get a better look at her face. Her eyes were open, unblinking, staring straight ahead. "Hey," Sam said, his voice gruff. "You okay?" She didn't answer. Sam frowned and tapped a metal crate with his boot to see if she'd flinch. Nothing. It was like she wasn't even there. "You need to eat," Sam said, more out of frustration than concern. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a protein bar, holding it out to her. "Here." Slowly, her head turned. Her glowing eyes locked onto the bar, then flicked up to meet his. For a moment, Sam swore the air in the room grew colder. She didn't reach for the food, just stared at him with an intensity that made his stomach knot. "Fine," he muttered, tossing the bar onto the crate next to her. "Starve if you want." As he turned to leave, a soft scraping sound stopped him in his tracks. He glanced back. She hadn't moved, but her hand was resting on the crate, fingers brushing the edge of the protein bar. Her golden eyes were locked on him again, unblinking, unyielding. Sam rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly uneasy. "You're a weird one. I'll give you that." Hours later, Sam sat in the cockpit, staring out at the stars. The old alien's words haunted him. "You don't know what you've bought." He sipped his drink and frowned at the security monitor. She was still in the same spot, holding the protein bar, but not eating it. What's her deal? He wondered. Most slaves were either terrified or defiant when they were freed from their cages. But this one, she was something else. The faint sound of footsteps pulled him from his thoughts. He turned sharply, his hand instinctively moving toward the pistol strapped to his hip. She was standing in the doorway of the cockpit. "How did you?" Sam started but stopped himself. He hadn't locked the cargo bay. That was his first mistake. The alien woman stood silently, clutching the uneaten protein bar. Her golden eyes shimmered in the dim light, and for the first time, Sam noticed how unnaturally bright they were, almost like they were alive, like they were watching him and everything else at the same time. "You shouldn't be up here," he said, his voice firm. "Go back to the cargo bay." She didn't move. Sam stood, the chair scraping against the floor. "I said." "I know," she said softly. Sam froze. The voice was faint, almost a whisper, but it was clear. Her accent was strange, her words slow, but she had spoken. His chest tightened as his mind raced. "Mute." The auctioneer had called her mute. You can talk," Sam said, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded. Her expression was calm, almost too calm. "Why didn't you say anything before?" Her golden eyes seemed to glow brighter as she stepped closer. Sam's hand hovered near his pistol. She noticed but didn't stop moving. When she spoke again, her words sent a chill down his spine. "Because they were listening." Sam's blood turned cold. "Who's they?" he demanded. She tilted her head slightly, like she was listening to something far away. "The ones who want me. The ones who will kill you." The ship suddenly shuddered, alarms blaring as red lights flashed across the cockpit. Sam rushed to the console and checked the scanners. 3 unidentified ships had appeared out of nowhere, closing in fast. "Damn it," he cursed, slamming his fist against the console. "How did they find us?" "They always find me," she said quietly. Sam turned to face her, his anger boiling over. "What the hell are you talking about? Who are you?" Her gaze didn't waver. "You bought me. Now you pay the price." Before Sam could respond, the ship shook violently, and the sound of weapons fire echoed through the hull. Sam's hands flew across the controls, trying to maneuver the ship, but the attackers were fast, relentless. In the chaos, she moved closer, her voice calm despite the alarms and flashing lights. "I can save us," she said, her golden eyes glowing so brightly they seemed to light up the room. "But you won't like what happens next." Sam stared at her, his heart pounding. He didn't understand what she meant, but he was out of options. "Do it," he said through gritted teeth. "Whatever it is, just do it." She placed her hand on the console, and for a moment, everything went still. Then the lights dimmed, and an energy unlike anything Sam had ever seen surged through the ship. "Hold on," she whispered. And then the universe exploded. The first word. The ship was silent again, save for the low hum of the engines as they drifted through an uncharted stretch of space. The chaos from earlier, the sudden attack, the alien woman's eerie calm, was over, but Sam felt far from safe. His ship was intact, though barely. The mysterious energy surge she had triggered had somehow disabled the enemy ships, but it had left his systems fried. The lights flickered every few minutes, and the navigation console still refused to work. Sam sat in the cockpit, staring at the woman seated on the floor nearby. She was calm, too calm, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She hadn't moved or spoken since the attack ended, and that made Sam uneasy. He leaned forward, gripping the arms of his chair. "All right, talk," he said, his voice sharp. "What the hell was that? What did you do back there?" The woman didn't respond. She sat cross-legged, her hands resting on her knees, staring out the viewport at the endless stretch of stars. Sam's frustration boiled over. "Hey," he snapped, standing up. "I'm talking to you. You don't get to pull some space magic stunt on my ship and then sit there like it's nothing." Still, no answer. Sam grabbed a metal crate and slammed it down in front of her, the clang echoing through the cockpit. She didn't flinch. Instead, her glowing eyes finally turned to him, locking onto his with an unsettling calm. "You can talk," Sam said, lowering his voice but not his intensity. "You did it before, so say something." For a long moment, she just stared. Sam's patience wore thin. He was about to give up when she finally spoke. Her voice was soft, almost too soft to hear, but the words hit him like a punch to the gut. "You're going to die." Sam froze, his chest tightening. He wanted to laugh it off, dismiss it as nonsense, but there was no humor in her tone. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. "What do you mean?" Sam demanded. "Is that a warning? A prophecy? What?" She tilted her head slightly, her glowing eyes narrowing. "They are coming. They will kill you. Because of me." Sam stared at her, his mind racing. "Who's coming?" "The ships from earlier." "Who are they?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she raised her hand and placed it on her chest. "I am not what you think," she said quietly. "I am not. Just an alien." Sam scoffed, folding his arms. "Yeah, I figured that much. So what are you?" Her gaze didn't waver. "A weapon." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Sam felt the blood drain from his face. "What do you mean, a weapon? You don't look like much of one." "I was made to destroy," she said simply. "But now they want me back. I ran. They chase." Sam rubbed his temples, trying to process what she was saying. "You're telling me you're some kind of living weapon? What, like a bomb?" Her golden eyes flared briefly, brighter than before. "Not a bomb," she said. "A key." "A key to what?" "To ending everything," she replied. Her voice was still calm, but there was a sadness in her tone now. "They want to use me. To open doors that should stay closed. To wake things that should stay asleep." Sam exhaled sharply, pacing the cockpit. "This is insane," he muttered. "I just wanted a cheap worker, not a galactic doomsday device." "You bought me," she said, her voice carrying an edge of bitterness. "You chose this." Sam stopped pacing and turned to face her. "I didn't choose anything. You were 5 credits at a shady auction. I thought I was buying a worker, not signing up for a death sentence." Her glowing eyes softened, and for the first time, she looked almost human. "You helped me," she said. "You didn't leave me there. That means something." Sam sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, well, I'm starting to regret it." Before she could respond, the ship jolted violently, and alarms blared through the cockpit. Sam rushed to the console, his stomach sinking as he saw the scanner. 3 new ships had appeared, and they were closing fast. "Damn it," Sam cursed, slamming his fist against the console. "More of them." She stood up slowly, her movements fluid and deliberate. "They won't stop," she said. "Not until I am gone." Sam turned to her, his jaw clenched. "What do you mean, gone?" She looked at him with an almost painful sadness. "I can save you, but it will cost you everything." Sam narrowed his eyes. "What does that mean?" "Stop being cryptic." Another violent jolt rocked the ship as the enemy fired a warning shot. She stepped closer, her golden eyes glowing brighter now, almost blinding. "You have to decide," she said. "Do you want to live?" Sam's hand hovered over the console, ready to engage evasive maneuvers. "Of course I want to live. What kind of question is that?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Then let me do what I was made to do." Before Sam could answer, another jolt sent him crashing to the floor. She knelt beside him, her hand brushing his arm. "Trust me," she said softly, "or they will kill us both." Sam looked into her glowing eyes, his chest pounding. He didn't know what she was, or what she was capable of, but he was out of options. Gritting his teeth, he nodded. "Fine. Do whatever you have to do." Her glowing eyes flared brighter than ever as she stood and placed her hands on the console. The ship's lights dimmed, and an eerie, otherworldly hum filled the air. Sam watched in stunned silence as a surge of energy pulsed through the ship, knocking him backward. For a moment, everything went still. And then, the universe screamed. The warning. The air inside the ship felt heavy, like the silence after a thunderstorm. Sam slumped in the pilot's chair, exhausted and confused. The strange alien woman, Kyra, as she had finally introduced herself, sat across from him in the dimly lit cockpit, her glowing eyes fixed on the stars outside. Her calm demeanor only added to the chaos swirling in Sam's mind. "You owe me some answers," Sam said, breaking the silence. His voice was sharp, but there was a nervous edge to it. He wasn't sure he wanted to know the truth, but he couldn't ignore it any longer. "Start from the beginning. Who are you, really?" Kyra turned her head slowly to meet his gaze. "I told you," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I am a weapon. That doesn't mean anything." Sam shot back, leaning forward. "What kind of weapon? For who? And why the hell are they chasing us?" Kyra looked down at her hands, which rested lightly on her lap. For the first time, she seemed hesitant. "I am not a weapon in the way you think," she began. "I was born, created, to be more. My people built me to guard something ancient, something dangerous. I am the key to it." Sam frowned. "The key to what?" She hesitated, her glowing eyes dimming slightly. "The vault. The vault." Sam repeated, leaning back. "What's in this vault?" Kyra looked back out the window, her expression unreadable. "Monsters," she said quietly. "Things that were locked away long before your kind ever reached the stars. My people made me to ensure it stayed locked. But then, they changed their minds." Sam narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean, changed their minds?" Kyra's voice was tinged with bitterness now. "They grew greedy. They wanted the power inside the vault. They wanted to use it to rule the galaxy. But I refused. So they turned on me. They tried to take my power, to control me." Sam rubbed his temples, trying to make sense of it all. "And let me guess, those ships out there, they're your people?" She nodded. "They hunt me because they need me. Without me, the vault stays closed. But if they capture me," her voice trailed off, and she didn't need to finish the sentence. Sam understood. "They'll use you to open it," he said grimly. Kyra met his gaze again. "And if that happens, nothing in this galaxy will survive." Sam sat in stunned silence, the weight of her words sinking in. He wasn't sure he believed her, but the fear in her voice was real. He'd seen enough in the galaxy to know that sometimes the truth was stranger than fiction. Still, one question burned in his mind. "Why me?" he asked. "Why didn't you say anything back at the auction? Why let me buy you?" Kyra tilted her head slightly, her golden eyes searching his face. "Because you were different," she said simply. "You didn't look at me like they did. You didn't see a slave or a tool. You just saw me." Sam snorted. "Yeah, well, I'm regretting that now." Her expression softened. "I don't blame you. I've brought danger to you. I should leave." "Leave?" Sam scoffed. "And what, just float around in space until they find you again? That's not exactly a plan." Kyra's glowing eyes brightened slightly. "There is a place," she said. "A planet, hidden far from here. It's where I was created. There, I can stop them. I can destroy the key. And myself." Her words hung in the air like a weight pressing down on Sam's chest. He didn't like the sound of it. "Destroy yourself?" he asked. "That's your big plan?" Kyra nodded. "It's the only way. If I don't, they will keep coming. And if they take me, the galaxy will burn." Sam leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "And you expect me to just drop everything and take you there?" "I expect nothing," Kyra said softly. "But if you help me, I can promise you one thing." Sam raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah? What's that?" Kyra's eyes locked onto his, glowing brighter than ever. "You will live." Before Sam could respond, the ship's alarms blared and the lights flickered. Sam spun around to check the console. Another ship had appeared on the scanner, closing in fast. This one was different, larger, sleeker, and heavily armed. "They found us," Kyra said, her voice steady. Sam's heart raced as he scrambled to the controls. "What do you mean, they? I thought we lost them." "They never stop," Kyra said calmly. She stood and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You need to decide now. Help me, or let me go." Sam hesitated, his mind racing. He didn't trust her, not fully, but he couldn't deny the truth in her words. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and sometimes the impossible was real. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. "But if this gets me killed, I'm haunting you." Kyra's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "I will make sure you don't die." The ship jolted as a blast rocked the hull, and Sam cursed under his breath. He grabbed the controls, pulling the ship into a sharp dive. "You better be worth it, Kyra." As the enemy ship loomed closer, Kyra stepped toward the console, her golden eyes glowing brighter than ever. "Trust me," she said softly. For a moment, Sam thought he saw something in her expression, a flicker of hope, or maybe fear. Then she placed her hands on the console, and everything changed. The ship surged forward, faster than it should have been able to go, and the stars outside blurred into streaks of light. Sam gripped the controls, his knuckles white, as Kyra's strange power enveloped the ship. For better or worse, he had made his choice. The chase. The stars blurred into long white streaks as Sam's ship rocketed through hyperspace. The engines screamed under the strain, vibrating through the entire vessel. Sam clung to the control panel, teeth clenched, as warning lights blinked angrily across the dashboard. They were moving faster than the ship was ever designed to go. "This isn't going to hold," Sam yelled over the groaning engines. "You're going to tear the ship apart." Behind him, Kyra stood calm and unmoving, her glowing hands pressed firmly against the navigation console. Her golden eyes burned brighter than ever, casting an eerie light across the cockpit. She didn't look at him, didn't respond. All her focus was on the chase. "They are still following," she said quietly, her voice oddly serene despite the chaos around them. Sam checked the scanner, his stomach sinking. She was right. 3 enemy ships were still on their tail, their signatures flickering red on the screen. No matter how fast they went, no matter how many wild maneuvers he pulled, they couldn't shake them. "How is that even possible?" Sam growled. "We're in hyperspace. No one can track in hyperspace." "They can," Kyra said simply. "They always can." Sam slammed his fist against the console in frustration. "Great. So we're just running blind while they chase us forever. That's the plan." Kyra's glowing eyes flicked toward him, calm and unshaken. "Not forever," she said. "Just until we reach the rift." "The rift?" Sam repeated, his voice rising. "You're taking us to that? You've lost your mind. No one survives the rift." "They won't follow us there," Kyra said firmly. "It is the only way." Sam swore under his breath, running a hand through his hair. The rift was a legendary stretch of space, a chaotic, swirling mass of gravitational anomalies and collapsing wormholes. Ships that entered it were never seen again. To call it dangerous was an understatement. It was a death sentence. "Look," Sam said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I've done some stupid things in my life, but flying into the rift, that's suicide." Kyra stepped closer, her glowing eyes meeting his. "You trusted me before. Trust me again. The rift is not what it seems." Sam opened his mouth to argue, but the ship suddenly jolted, throwing him against the console. The enemy ships had opened fire, their plasma blasts tearing through hyperspace and rattling his ship like a tin can. "Fine," he shouted, slamming his hand on the controls. "But if we die, I'm haunting you." Kyra allowed herself a faint smile, the closest thing to emotion Sam had seen from her. "We won't die," she said softly. Sam muttered another curse as he punched in the new course. The ship groaned in protest, the engines threatening to fail, but the coordinates locked in. The stars outside twisted and warped as the ship veered toward the rift, the edges of the void already visible on the scanner. A swirling, chaotic storm of light and shadow. The enemy ships didn't back off. If anything, they grew more aggressive, their blasts hammering against Sam's shields. Warning sirens blared in the cockpit, and smoke began to fill the room as systems started to fail. "We're not going to make it," Sam shouted, yanking the controls to avoid another barrage. "The shields are down to 12%. We're toast." Kyra moved beside him, her hand brushing his arm. Her touch was strangely warm, calming even. "You will make it," she said. Before Sam could respond, she turned and walked to the center of the cockpit. Her glowing eyes burned brighter than ever, and a strange golden light began to radiate from her body, filling the room. The smoke dissipated, the alarms silenced, and for a brief moment, everything felt still. "What are you doing?" Sam asked, his voice laced with both fear and awe. "Protecting you," Kyra said, her voice echoing as if it came from somewhere far away. "This is what I was made for." The golden light around her flared, and Sam's ship surged forward, faster than anything he'd ever experienced. The controls slipped from his hands as the vessel seemed to move on its own, darting through hyperspace like a predator stalking its prey. The enemy ships fired again, but their blasts were absorbed by the golden light, dissipating harmlessly. Sam stared in disbelief. "How are you doing this?" Kyra didn't answer. Her focus was on the rift, which now loomed ahead like a gaping maw of chaos and destruction. The swirling storm of gravitational distortions seemed to pulse with life, and Sam's instincts screamed at him to turn back. But Kyra's light grew brighter, cutting through the darkness like a beacon. "They will not follow us beyond this point," she said, her voice soft but unwavering. "They fear what is inside." Sam swallowed hard, gripping the controls. "And we're not supposed to fear it." Kyra glanced at him, and for the first time, there was something in her glowing eyes that looked almost human. "You fear the unknown," she said, "but sometimes the unknown is the only way forward." Sam didn't have time to argue. The rift was right in front of them now, its chaotic tendrils reaching out like claws. The enemy ships hesitated, pulling back, but Sam's ship surged forward, carried by Kyra's golden light. As they plunged into the storm, Sam held his breath, expecting the ship to be torn apart. But instead there was a sudden, deafening silence. The light from the rift faded, and Sam found himself staring out at nothing. The vast, endless void stretched before them, quiet and calm, like the eye of a hurricane. Kyra lowered her hands, the golden light fading from her body. She looked exhausted, but her expression was calm. "It is done," she said softly. "For now." Sam exhaled, slumping back in his chair. "You're full of surprises, you know that." Kyra's lips curved into the faintest smile. "And you are still alive." Sam chuckled despite himself, shaking his head. "Barely. But I'll take it." For the first time, he felt like they might have a chance, though what lay ahead in the rift was anyone's guess. The revelation. The rift was eerily silent. No engine hum, no creaking metal, no sound at all. Outside the viewport, the swirling chaos of light and shadow seemed frozen in time. Sam stared at it, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. The rift wasn't just a storm. It was alive, pulsing faintly like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. "We shouldn't be here," Sam muttered, gripping the armrests of his chair. "This place, it feels wrong." Kyra stood by the window, her glowing eyes reflecting the strange energy outside. Her expression was unreadable, but her voice carried a weight that made Sam's stomach churn. "It is wrong," she said quietly, "but it's the only place they cannot follow. The rift bends space and time. To them, it's a trap they cannot escape." Sam raised an eyebrow, leaning forward in his chair. And we can escape. That's comforting. Kyra glanced at him, the faintest hint of a smile on her lips. We can. But first, you must know the truth. Sam groaned, slumping back. Great. Another cryptic speech. You really know how to keep a guy guessing, don't you? Kyra turned to face him fully, her glowing eyes dimming slightly. This is not a guessing game, Sam. This is about survival. Yours, mine, and the galaxy's. Her tone silenced his sarcasm. Sam gestured for her to continue, though his nerves buzzed with unease. Kyra moved closer, her golden gaze fixed on him. Do you know what the rift truly is? She asked. Sam frowned. A giant death trap for anyone stupid enough to come near it. She shook her head. It's more than that. The rift is a prison, built long ago by a civilization far older than yours or mine. They called themselves the Architects. Sam blinked. The Architects. Never heard of them. You wouldn't have, Kyra said. They vanished long before your species even looked up at the stars. But they were not destroyed. They chose to disappear, to seal themselves inside this place, along with the monsters they created. Sam leaned forward, his curiosity overriding his caution. Monsters? Like what? Kyra's eyes dimmed further, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Beings of pure energy. Immortal. Unstoppable. The Architects made them to control the galaxy, but their creations turned on them. The Architects realized too late that their ambition had doomed them all. So they built the rift to trap the monsters, and themselves, forever. Sam rubbed his temples, trying to process her words. Okay, so, you're saying we're sitting inside an ancient prison for galaxy-destroying creatures, and the Architects just stayed here. Kyra nodded. They believed it was their duty to contain what they had unleashed. But their creations were too powerful. Over time, the rift began to weaken. Cracks appeared in its structure. And let me guess, Sam said, his tone bitter, those cracks are why we're in this mess. Kyra hesitated, then nodded. Yes, my people discovered the rift centuries ago. They found something within the cracks, a way to access the Architects' creations. They believed they could harness the monster's power and use it to rule the galaxy. Sam shook his head, his frustration boiling over. Why is it always about power? Why can't anyone just leave well enough alone? Kyra's glowing eyes brightened slightly, a flicker of sadness in their depths. Because greed is universal. My people created me to access the rift safely, to open its doors without triggering the wrath of the Architects' creations. I am the key, the living bridge between their prison and the galaxy. Sam froze, his breath catching in his throat. So, if they capture you, they can unleash those monsters. Yes, Kyra said simply. And they will. Sam stood, pacing the cockpit. This is insane. I didn't sign up for some galaxy-ending war. I'm just a guy trying to survive out here. You are more than that now, Kyra said, her voice steady. You chose to help me. That makes you part of this, whether you want to be or not. Sam stopped pacing, turning to glare at her. I didn't choose anything. You dragged me into this. Kyra stepped closer, her glowing eyes meeting his. And you could have left me in that cage. But you didn't. Why? Sam opened his mouth to argue but found no words. He thought back to the auction, to the moment he raised his hand to buy her. He didn't know why he'd done it. Maybe it was pity. Maybe it was guilt. Or maybe it was something deeper, something he didn't want to admit. I don't know, he said finally, his voice softer. I couldn't lead you there. Kyra's gaze softened. And that is why you will succeed. Because you care, even when it's hard. Sam sighed, running a hand through his hair. Yeah, well, caring doesn't fix my ship or stop an ancient army of monsters from wiping us out. No, Kyra agreed, but it gives us a chance. She turned back to the viewport, her eyes glowing brighter as she gazed into the swirling chaos of the rift. There is a place within this storm, she said. The architects left it as a fail-safe, a final weapon to destroy the monsters if they ever escaped. Sam frowned. And you think it's still there? After all this time? I know it is, Kyra said, because I can feel it calling to me. Sam stared at her, his mind racing. Every instinct told him to run, to find the nearest safe port and leave this nightmare behind. But deep down, he knew he couldn't. He'd crossed a line the moment he chose to help her. And now there was no going back. All right, he said finally, his voice steady. Let's find this fail-safe. But if we die, I'm blaming you. Kyra's lips curved into a faint smile. If we die, there will be no one left to blame. Sam chuckled despite himself, shaking his head. You've got a great sense of humor for someone carrying the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders. It's not humor, Kyra said softly, her gaze distant. It's hope. And with that, she turned to face the chaos of the rift, her glowing eyes fixed on the unknown that lay ahead. The final stand. The heart of the rift was nothing like Sam had imagined. It wasn't a swirling storm of chaos or a glowing void. It was calm. Too calm. The ship floated in a strange, endless expanse where time and space felt wrong. Stars hung in the distance, but they didn't twinkle. They just watched, like silent sentinels. This is it? Sam asked, his voice uneasy. The big, scary center of the galaxy's most dangerous prison. I was expecting more explosions. Kyra stood at the center of the cockpit, her glowing eyes scanning the vast, unnatural stillness outside. The silence is the warning, she said softly. This place is not what it seems. Sam rolled his eyes, trying to mask the fear creeping into his chest. Of course it isn't. Why would anything about this nightmare be simple? Before Kyra could respond, the ship's lights flickered. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the metal walls. Sam froze. He didn't recognize the sound. It wasn't the engines, wasn't a weapon. It was something else. Something alive. What the hell is that? He asked, his voice sharp. Kyra didn't answer immediately. She stepped closer to the viewport, her hands gripping the edge of the console. Her glowing eyes brightened as she whispered, "They're waking up." Sam felt his stomach drop. Who's waking up? The monsters. Kyra turned to face him, her expression calm but her voice laced with urgency. The architects. The hum grew louder, pulsing like a heartbeat. Sam's hands hovered over the controls, but the ship refused to respond. The engines were offline, the weapons disabled. It was as if the rift itself had taken hold of the vessel, forcing it to stay still. "Okay, this is bad," Sam muttered. "Really, really bad." Kyra closed her eyes, her glowing hands resting on the console. "It's not them," she said, her voice distant, almost like she was listening to something Sam couldn't hear. "Not yet." "What does that mean?" Sam demanded. "Who's coming?" Kyra opened her eyes, her golden gaze locking onto his. "My people. They found us." As if on cue, the scanner lit up with multiple red blips. Enemy ships poured into the rift, their sleek, angular designs cutting through the unnatural calm like sharks in dark water. Sam's heart pounded as he counted them. 5. No, 10. Too many to fight, too many to run from. "They don't fear the rift anymore," Kyra said softly. "They've come for me. For the key." Sam clenched his fists, his mind racing. "And what happens if they take you?" "The galaxy burns. Everyone dies." "Yes," Kyra said simply. "And worse." Sam exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Great. No pressure." The enemy ships formed a tight formation, their weapons trained on Sam's vessel. A message crackled through the comms, distorted but clear enough to make Sam's blood run cold. "Return the key, human. This is your only warning." Sam glanced at Kyra, who stood motionless, her glowing eyes fixed on the fleet outside. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice low. "We can't fight them." Kyra's expression softened. "You don't have to. This is my fight." "Like hell it is," Sam shot back. You think I'm going to sit here and let you sacrifice yourself? Kyra stepped closer, her voice gentle but firm. You've done enough, Sam, more than I ever expected. But this is where your part ends. I was made for this moment. You were not. Sam grabbed her arm, his grip firm. No, we're in this together. You don't get to make that decision for me. Kyra hesitated, her golden eyes flickering. If I stay, they will kill you. I won't let that happen. Too bad, Sam said, his jaw set. I'm not leaving. So figure out another plan. The hum grew louder, the enemy ships drawing closer. Kyra's glowing eyes flared as she stepped toward the center of the cockpit. There is another way, she said quietly, but it will cost me everything. Sam frowned. What are you talking about? Kyra raised her hands, golden light pouring from her fingertips. The energy spread across the cockpit, seeping into the walls and consoles. The ship trembled as the light grew brighter, enveloping everything. I can end this, Kyra said. I can destroy the key, destroy myself, and seal the rift forever. But only if you leave. Sam's heart pounded. No, we'll find another way. We always do. There is no other way, Kyra said softly. You've already saved me, Sam. Let me save you. Sam clenched his fists, his mind screaming for a solution. But deep down, he knew she was right. The enemy ships were too close. There was no time. Damn it, Kyra, he muttered, his voice breaking. You don't have to do this. She stepped closer, her glowing eyes meeting his. I do, because you gave me something no one else ever has. You gave me hope. Sam swallowed hard, his chest tightening. He wanted to argue, to fight, but he couldn't. Not this time. Okay, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. But if you're going out, make it count. Kyra smiled, a small, sad smile that made Sam's heart ache. I will. The golden light around her grew brighter, blinding, as she turned back to the viewport. The enemy ships fired, but their blasts were absorbed by the energy radiating from Kyra. The entire ship shook as her power reached its peak, the light spreading outward in a wave that consumed everything in its path. Sam shielded his eyes, his heart racing. Kyra, he shouted. Her voice echoed through the cockpit, soft and steady. Goodbye, Sam. And then, in an instant, the light exploded outward, swallowing the ship, the rift, and everything within it. When Sam opened his eyes, he was back in open space. The rift was gone, replaced by a calm, endless stretch of stars. The ship's systems were online, humming softly, as if nothing had happened. But Kyra was gone. Sam sat in the cockpit, staring out at the stars, his chest heavy. On the console in front of him was a small, glowing crystal, faintly golden, pulsing like a heartbeat. She really did it, he whispered. For a moment, he let himself believe it was over. But as the crystal pulsed again, he couldn't help but wonder, was this truly the end, or just the beginning of something far greater?